I call the member for Menzies.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. Well, in a statement lasting 13.5 minutes, the minister failed to address the one issue, the one question on the lips of everybody in this country concerned about a national disability insurance scheme. And that question is simply this: where is the money coming from? That's the question which disability groups around this country, people with disabilities, are concerned about. They want to know that beyond the rhetoric, beyond all the plans that the minister is talking about, beyond all the talk, the bottom line is, where is the money coming from? Where is the fancy way of saying no? Is that what the minister is suggesting at the table? Is that what the government's suggesting? No, we're not. Now, this actually nails the position of the government on this issue. The minister at the table interjects and says this is just a fancy way of the opposition saying no. The opposition saying no. And we put $1 billion on the table. And how much did the Productivity Commission suggest? $1 billion on the table. And what did the Productivity Commission suggest? How much? That's $2.9 billion less, $2.9 billion less, $2.9 billion less than what has been suggested. And here we get this attempted verballing by the minister at the table, saying that somehow the opposition is saying no. Well, nobody is saying no to the NDIS. The coalition supports the NDIS. I've said that on numerous occasions, and I won't be verbal by the minister at the table suggesting anything else. The reality is, when faced with the question of where the money's coming from, all we get is interjections from the other side of the chamber here saying every time. And this is coming from a ministers overseeing a $120 billion black hole in their budget at the present time. This is coming from a government that says we've got plans to spend billions of dollars on the Gonski education changes, want to spend billions of dollars on dental health, who's blown out by a couple of $1 billion what they're spending on border protection, and this is coming down to another $7 billion, and most reputable health economists say it'll be in the order of $10 billion. And the question that people rightly ask, where is the money coming from? And we get absolutely no answer. No answer to that central question. So a 13.5-minute statement, nice, fine-sounding rhetoric about a national disability insurance scheme which we support, but we want to know an answer to the question, where is the money coming from? And then the reality is that every government and every opposition in Australia, Liberal and Labor, federal, state and territory, supports the National Disability Insurance Scheme, supports it. Liberal, Labor, coalition and government and opposition right around this country supports the scheme. Now, there have been considerable developments since the release of the Productivity Commission's final report, developments which the coalition on every occasion has supported. The coalition, of course, supports the $1 billion appropriation over the forward estimates. The coalition supports the launch sites that have been announced. The coalition supports the appointment of the Chief Executive for the Transition Agency. The reality is that the National Disability Insurance Scheme is a landmark reform. That's why we support it, and we've approached the NDIS in a non-partisan way. But Labor, as the minister has just highlighted, the minister who's now left the chamber in particular, treats the NDIS as a political football. They want it to be a partisan issue, and they probably do so because there are tough questions which Labor has yet to answer and some facts that they don't face up to. Now, for example, we don't have an answer to the question as to how the first phase of the NDIS can be completed when Labor has allocated $2.9 billion less than the Productivity Commission said is necessary, almost $3 billion less than what the Productivity Commission said is necessary. We don't have an answer as to whether the government is committed to the Productivity Commission target completion date of 2018-19. No answer to that. We don't have an answer as to how the government would fund a full national rollout of the NDIS. And as I said, this is a government which has made announcements saying it's going to spend billions of dollars on education, it's going to spend billions of dollars on a dental scheme. It's blown out by billions of dollars the cost of border protection in this country. We know they've got a $120 billion black hole, and there's another $10 billion in this scheme if it's rolled out according to what most reputable health economists say it would actually cost. The question as to where the money is coming from is actually a realistic question. And it's a question as I go around the country, which, as I said, is on the lips of every person concerned with disability as to how this is going to be funded. Because the reality is this would be a cruel hoax, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, if after all this rhetoric then it's not going to be properly funded. So we don't have answers to even the most general questions about eligibility issues, which at the moment are particularly concerning people with sensory impairment. The government's response to all this is to attack us and say we don't support the NDIS. And we heard exactly those words from the minister who's now left the chamber when I started my contribution to this discussion. So the truth is that Labor doesn't know how to fund the NDIS. If they had a plan, they would have released it. But they don't have a plan, and the reality is they're simply making this up as they go along. And instead of working with us on the NDIS, Labor is playing politics. Let me give you an example. The Leader of the Opposition has written to the Prime Minister on 5 occasions to establish a joint parliamentary committee to be chaired by both sides of politics to oversee the implementation of the NDIS. And the Prime Minister has rejected that approach. 5 occasions, invitations gone out from the Leader of the Opposition to treat this in a way which would be completely partisan, above all politics, and each time this has been rejected by the Prime Minister. You know, this would actually provide a mechanism to elevate the NDIS beyond partisanship. But it would also serve as a forum where questions about the timetable, the funding, the eligibility and the design could be raised and properly worked through. My portfolio colleague and representative in the other place, Senator Fifield, the Shadow Minister for Disabilities, put a motion to establish this committee to a vote on the floor of the Senate recently. Unfortunately, Labor and their friends in their alliance together, the Greens, combined to defeat it. So it appears, when one stands back and looks at this, that Labor wants credit for the NDIS. But the NDIS shouldn't be about credit. It shouldn't be about political point scoring. It should be about delivering landmark reform for all of those people who need our help. My friend who's in the chamber, the member for Dawson, has moved in this place the same motion to establish a committee. And I hope that when it comes to a vote in this place, contrary to the decision taken elsewhere, that Labor reconsiders its position. So let me repeat once again, quite clearly, for the minister who's walked out, if he happens to be watching on his monitor, we support the NDIS. The states support the NDIS. It's time Labor told us how they're going to fund the NDIS. It's time they stopped playing politics and time they started delivering. This is just too important for the petty games that Labor want to play. The reality is that we get the impression again today in the minister's statement that, like in so many other areas, they're simply making it up as they go along.